you?
Yes.
Hey, I got you. Sweet. This is the greatest logo in sports.
I don't know. I'm not particular to my Islander logo.
It's got some sticky stuff. I tried to get it off.
That's fine. So I'll put it on the wall.
Somebody gave it 2 years ago. You know those last year's.
Yeah.
Quick cash use it. Somebody stuck this on the list.
No,
This
definitely.
one's
That's awesome. So we're shooting thing we set up for my son downstairs. So they actually have a Detroit, this flag suspenders. I was able back when they ever played the Coliseum, they stayed at the hotel across the street. So we go there early, get them as they go on. We had it signed by Eisen and Federal.
I know.
That day.
pretty
Oh, I
cool.
know.
It was really neat. Except that.
And I went to a Redmond game in Nashville.
Okay.
Maybe 10
Yeah, I
years
think we
ago.
met at the.
It was after I was retired. He was still working for the
Am I pronouncing it correct?
Sort of.
Yeah.
That's close.
We stayed
Okay.
in a hotel room.
I'll practice.
So
Okay.
we're checking out
And I'd eat.
the next morning.
Okay.
Iserman had
Yes.
2 girls.
Yeah, I've met everybody.
That's awesome.
I mean, I've seen them around town.
Yeah.
Post show.
I know that hotel. I stayed at that one. That's a nice hotel.
Sorry, here's my question.
In fact, I think he was at, I
No,
was
was
at
there?
the PSO last.
I said just in case. I didn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, because.
You can throw that on my,
Breast cancer.
and same with that one. I wasn't sure.
I put handouts for sent you.
Okay, got it.
And I was up in
I think that's what they do.
Yeah.
So I
You good with
shot an
understanding
email
everything
to
there?
Marie.
Okay.
If she's the right person to ask.
She would be with us.
Okay.
So anyway, so the guys introduced
I
me
can't
to
see why
him.
that's.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, it's the total assumption that makes a difference. Versus the information and component and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, this is good. Steve
All
Eisner.
right.
And
Hello.
everybody-
Hello, how you doing? All right, so.
He didn't know I was
Okay.
gonna say that. I think
Very,
he
right?
must have been down.
Oh, very cool. Very.
What's in the letter?
Just the assumption.
Any,
So in that little house room we got set up, I got Detroit,
Right, so the
but
mentality's just.
Hot Blade signed by Wayne Gretzky. I got a bunch
So
of
they only have.
calendar Hot
section
Blades,
and
Pat
people
Flatley,
that know to-
Pat LaFontaine.
They would
Just
just have to
like
put in quiet communication.
Oh, okay, so we don't have.
Up on Tanis.
Detroit.
Visual.
Yeah.
There's a lot of-
Okay.
Okay. I met him a few times, and actually, I worked there, and I skated with him one time. I worked as manager at ice rink, and so in the summer, all the Islanders and pros used to skate at them. So this year, as a coach, I was able to skate with them in the summer. Nicest guy. Unbelievable.
Oh, that.
Yeah.
All that, all of it different. They just brought Stidham was down to earth.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, but he was one of the nicest. He took his time to know my name. He would sit down with me after I came off the shift. I was like, well, he said, great. Do you have a copy of that? Try doing this. It was really neat.
You know, I
So
printed
Pat
one,
LaFontaine
and
could have
then-
some random.
I also printed Oakland Townships.
Oh.
And then I grabbed that one and not this one. Right.
I'm just thinking, how are you? How are you? Be good, I'm just seeing you with neighbors.
I can help you with
Yeah, my
that.
wife.
You want to hang it on the
That's
back?
okay, that's okay.
You got it?
Hold it.
Yeah.
Hold it.
How was it?
Oh, it was great.
You ever see those hooks?
Yes.
My wife has one of those. She loves it. Especially in a public place where you don't necessarily want the purse on the floor.
Right.
No
That's
critter,
what I'm
no
not-
critter
that's-
crawlers
that's
getting in
not-
there.
Nope, money cannot leave my purse like that.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Or roaches get in the purse.
No, there ain't gonna be none of that either.
Right. That's the thing, at a restaurant or something, you just never know.
Mr. Giddings, this is Mandy. She's in Lincoln.
Hi, nice to meet you.
With us over this summer.
Oh, good luck.
Do not need
So,
this.
where do you go to school? Oh, okay.
Okay. Okay.
Let's see, if somebody asked me if you're the
Hello, Patrice, how you doing? I was thinking about this movie. I went to see Pets 2. Oh, you need to go see it.
It's good.
No, it is so much fun.
Is it fun?
Oh,
I need that. I
and
need a good laugh.
Kevin Hart. He's one of the.
Yeah, okay,
He's
okay.
one. He's a rabbit, the kid's rabbit, and he's a superhero.
I see the commercials. You know anything he in is fast speaking anyway.
Oh, he is, but it is so much fun. The lady came up to me
Woo,
and said,
thank you.
I can't believe how
I'm like,
you're
I'm
laughing.
uncomfortable.
Oh, I just turned the air.
No, I'm just saying, from last night, marathon.
Oh, you.
Yeah, girl.
Yeah, fire them up. Hey, send me no damn mail.
I just want to check with you quickly about the value edge contract.
Right.
You're gonna file the day before, which would be Labor Day.
No. I didn't realize what they, okay, I'll get with you on those things. Do we have, I have this in now?
As soon as possible, because they booked it. We don't.
Oh, okay.
So, as soon
Okay.
as you can get it
Okay.
in, I'll send you an email. But I
Yeah, last night.
Yeah, I will. I will. I'm
Sorry,
just,
love you.
oh my God.
What Sheldon he talked to you with now?
Yeah. You ready? I'm good. That's all I need to know. I don't need to know no more.
Thunderstorms?
I am so tired. I might even get up out of here.
I know that's right. I know that's right. That meeting was long. I was like, and it's
we
bull.
went back to the older days when we had a marathon last night. And then I know Thursday, I know Friday's gonna be another. It's gonna be a headache. 'Cause they ain't gonna be having the stuff that we did.
And you know what made me was, we got a supposed finance director. They told him orally what he put, Chip been writing it down. Right. And he ain't write nothing down. He's, and then the mayor sent it to me. And then she has to send it to him. And then he needs 2 full days.
Well, I'm gonna give them that, cause it's like all that junk we got going on, they got a calculated figure. I give them that, but it's like,
I don't
all that
give
other
nothing. I don't give nothing. I'm like, adjust it, baby, and keep on stepping. You said you could do accounting. Do it. If you can't do it, get your ass up out of here. You need to get up out of here anyway. I just want to sue your ass.
would you be nice over there, Billy? Billy Sway. Like, Lord have mercy.
No, and wait till I get to this.
Oh, I'm leaving. You do have so much to say. I am not saying this with you, Billy Sway. I ain't gonna do it.
Okay, I'm gonna be all right then. I guess since you ain't
I'm
gonna mess
leaving you, Billy.
since you ain't gonna mess with me. Oh, hey, look, wait a minute. They got 3 musketeers. I got the. Oh, wait a minute. They got a Snicker bar.
Oh, yeah, that was different.
Hey, look.
So I like it, y'all wearing dresses, yay.
Hey, I don't wear a dress because I'm going to mow the grass. As soon as we finish. I'm going. My granddaughter, no, I got pants in the car. My granddaughter and grandson, you know, Miss Black, you know, we mow her grass. She got thrown off of Ocean because the next door came out and had a problem with the guy on the tractor going on his white driveway. So he told him about it. The guy said some stuff and he said some stuff. He went in the house and put a gun in his t-shirt.
Who is the man?
The man next door to Miss Black. And he came up and was talking. So the man only gets $15 for doing Miss Black's yard. Okay, so he really didn't want to do Miss Black's yard. So he had, you know, when you have a mower, a tractor mower, with grass, all it does is clump up. And Miss Black says, it's not good enough. You know what? You should let me just do it. Because I just pay them kids. And I tell them that, you know, one of y'all got to mow the grass.
Billy, God's confession.
I swear to God, she's coming special.
Hey, look, they need to learn how to mow the grass.
I'm gonna move my purse over here because what's the name tell me before our purse was in his way. John said, if you put your purse up there on the thing, because it was in his way. So I'm gonna pull my purse over there so it won't be in John's way. So he can be seen and he told me.
Yeah.
Oh, no, we're down.
I said, you know what? I said,
We're
listen,
down.
I got so much stuff that I don't wear.
Oh, no, we're
I'm
down.
just gonna take my stuff home and wear it. I said, but then the day, I said, God, I said, I gotta be comfortable. I ain't trying to be bogged down and tightened up. It's like, this dress can go. I can get out of there and go about my business.
Yeah, she had an orange one last night. It was really sharp. Orange was really sharp.
I was like,
Oh.
Hi, ladies.
Hello, how you
How are
doing?
you?
Good.
so I'm like, oh. I told my brother and he said, you need to have a rabbit sale. I'm like, I ain't got patience for that.
I know Thomas Ways was having a garage sale, and he said, I'm gonna have to price these up to give it away, because this, I just gotta get too much stuff.
I know.
I said, whatever.
See,
He
and that's-
said, don't you
and
have
that's what I
anything?
told
I
the
said, no,
president of-
I don't have
I'm
nothing.
like,
All
y'all
right.
messing around, taking up my time, because this weekend was gonna be my declutter weekend. Now I gotta mess with some.
Well, it's because she sent that letter out.
But she, you know what, that pissed me off, because you know better than that, because when we had the meeting, if you was gonna do, when we had that meeting on Friday, you didn't have to send that letter, you knew Tuesday we was gonna come in there and vote on that. You're not trying to beat some things,
Oh,
I'll go along with it.
and then to
Some
say
things
the
you just
first,
would.
the first business day. You know what?
And like you said, I like Billy said, so we got to August.
At the end of August, to pay our taxes, and I got my money. What you talking about?
I was like, Julie is killing me.
And then here you go. It pissed me off when people said, well, the county and Waterford ain't gonna come out. Tell them don't come. Tell them don't come, and we will find somebody, we can do this ourselves again.
See, that's
We
what I
don't
want.
need
I
it.
want to bring all that stuff
Don't.
back in house. I really do.
You wanna play with us? We keep our 12 million and spend it on ourselves.
You got that? You got that? You got the audit thing, cause is that in here too? And I
It's on the beginning. It's right,
Yeah, but
right
I'm
there,
just saying this,
right there, right there.
cause I'm trying to give her.
See there,
But
right.
if we have this part in here, cause if we do, then I can give Linda mine.
Oh, I didn't. It should be in there because we had it in there the other day. Oh, hey, is this it? No, it's the actual one.
I'm just trying to see this information right
Hold on.
here. You're right, 'cause if we got this in this book, then I can get this too.
No, auditor.
Well, so we've got these two that are empty.
Why something now? That's like the actual. Yeah, it's right here in the beginning. It's in the beginning. What this is?
Is that it? This ain't the mine.
It's like right after that, then it says audit. It says 2018 audit and financial
Okay, well, I
statement.
can get this to Linda.
Little mommy daughter.
Oh, wow. Nice. Yeah, the April one was my daughter's concert.
Yeah.
All right, so now,
Last month.
since I got all that here, you can have it.
Yeah, we go up to, Seagull.
If we got any different people here, we don't need to know their names and who they are. Okay, so that black guy came here last time, and we didn't know who he was with the little bow tie. We need to know who everybody is. I don't want to know no people.
Billy?
Okay, I got my Snicker bar. I'm gonna be quiet.
Thank you, Billy. Cause what was that? What's that commercial with the guy?
Yeah.
We were talking about that in finance, because Mr. Moore had asked who he was, we talked about how in a public meeting, you can ask people to sign in, but under the open meeting act, you can't require them to give your name, so, but we can ask.
I'm gonna ask.
Hey, Deborah,
You might well know.
it's 10 o'clock. Is anyone else, we don't have a quorum yet. Is anyone else expected to be here?
What you want?
Is anyone else expecting?
You don't have nothing on fire. Somebody come up here with a gun and shoot us all up. And I gotta ask about,
I can't hear you, Deborah.
Majors. Curtis Majors. Curtis Majors, you know how we supposed to terminate his, hey,
Well, it's 10 o'clock, so, we just need to go ahead and get started, and then when they come, we'll have a quorum perhaps,
These people are not the ones you wanna play with.
because I don't think we should hold up the meeting.
Come see you.
We can't conduct any business, right?
That's fine, Mr. Moore, we can start the meeting. We just can't conduct
Yeah,
Hi, Mr.
What
Moore.
is 1, 2, 3, 4,
we got 5.
5?
But we can get started, and hopefully they'll come. Somebody will come in before we have to vote on anything.
He comes, the doorbell rang.
Okay, well, we have a quorum.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure.
Oh, the cameraman. Oh, she has a thing for, hey, Clay, how you doing?
Hi, Clay, how are you?
The thing for,
Hey, Claudia?
yeah, that's Claudia.
Yeah, tell us Samantha is not scheduled. I guess Deborah got a call this morning. She's not going to be here this meeting. She'll be here next month. I don't know what
Claudia.
that's about.
Oh, she says not on the agenda.
She called this morning and said she couldn't make it.
Yeah, right, right. Delay, stall, delay. Deny.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and get started, and then I'm sure Sheldon or James will join us at some point, and then we can ratify any action that we need to make. So will you call the roll?
Allwritten, Balin, Gaffney, Giddings, Moore,
Present.
Swazer,
Present.
Walker, D. Waterman, P. Waterman,
Present.
White,
Okay, we don't have a quorum yet, but hopefully we will.
Where you at?
Okay, so let's go into a public comment. Is there anyone from the public that would want to speak?
I've got a couple of questions.
It's the meeting at 10 o'clock. I don't
Last
see it.
month, what is the
It
DT
is. We're
bill
here waiting for you. We don't have a quorum.
It may be too.
No, we don't, but we can go ahead and take care of business until somebody comes.
Yes, for real.
We can't sit around.
In the meeting.
We'll get a
I'm
bill.
in the meeting.
Linda, are you speaking as from the public?
Yes.
Could you get to the end of the table?
It was here, but it was supposed to be.
Yeah, right there. Go ahead.
Supposed to be masked.
Okay, my question was about the DTE bill from last month.
Can we allow Linda to speak? Go ahead, Linda.
I'm questioning the bill for DTE last month. Also Detroit.
Hold on, Linda. Can you hold on just a second? Okay, go ahead.
Excuse me, can I say something? Can
Yes, please.
Sheldon do the meeting by phone?
Absolutely.
Yes, call in now. Let's call in now. Oh, call her office.
She's gonna get a number.
Why don't we wait until Sheldon joins us?
Okay, wait a minute. Just a minute.
You know what?
Just a minute.
Because of the meeting was changed, a lot of people thinking it's the 26th, and that's probably why these three are not here.
Oh, yeah, muscle memory.
Yeah, right.
White is at a
Email said the
conference.
21st, even though they had.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, you're right. It did.
White is not a conference.
Take my phone and get the phone up. Can he just call into the office and y'all transfer? Well, you got a note, you got a number? You got the number so you can give it to him? Here, give him the number.
Okay, the phone number, are you getting, it's a conference call? Right? Okay. Okay.
That's what John White and Jay Walker are here.
That's right. 'Cause they
And the
think it was
mayor's
26.
got us another meeting. She got the,
They never-
the joint.
Everybody got it all
She got
mixed
the
up.
JDC meeting.
For security
Yeah,
purposes.
she got the JDC meeting today
Followed
at
by the
10.
pound sign.
Cause I got the information for a citizen from Louisville Township.
Your passcode has been confirmed. Please wait while you are joined to the conference. Remember, leaders, *0 will call an operator at any time during your meeting. You are the first caller to this conference. Please wait while others join.
537.
Please state your name and company now.
7715.
And that's why he's not here. Take that. That's it. I don't care.
And the passcode
Everybody got it mixed up today.
Thank you.
is 954 88374. 374. Correct. Okay.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks, Billy.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay, okay.
Oh, yeah.
You got James's number?
John J.
John ain't gonna be able to do it because his work. But James might be able to do it.
Hey, James, this is Billy. Hey, we had a board meeting today, a Gers board meeting. Where you at? Okay. Oh, yeah, okay. It's the 19th, but we had early because we thought we'd all be going to Nash. So we scheduled them. Yeah, so how long will you be here? 20 minutes? Okay, okay, thanks. Okay, James will be here in 20 minutes.
Okay.
James Walker will be here in 20 minutes.
I don't know if he has to hit a
Okay.
pound.
Want to bring this meeting back to order?
Here, text him from, no, this Sheldon? Yeah, this Sheldon. Here, text, do whatever you do. I don't know how to text. That's great.
Well, he can't hear. He can't vote.
Who's that?
Having technical difficulty.
We lost Mr. Moore.
Mhm. Okay, this is fun. Sheldon's calling and James is on his way, so we'll have more. We'll have a quorum if we don't get the mayor back in.
Thank you.
Sheldon, you on the line? We didn't hear no beat,
And
did
we
we?
hear
That's like, hey, these people, I don't want to be wasting my day.
Don't you know it? In the sunshine, and I only get one free day.
You shoot. It's supposed to rain this evening.
Yeah, my God, it's out cutting my grass. It goes now. I'm gonna put some fertilizer on this for rain.
It's, my grandkids, that's what make them do, go cut this black grass after that episode. She called me before I went to a council meeting.
Okay, do we have Sheldon?
We do not have Sheldon yet.
Okay, so we still have 5, right?
That's correct.
All righty.
Let's get on the road.
Okay, we'll try. Is Linda still around?
Yes, she is.
Okay, Linda, let's try it again.
I'm questioning the amount paid for DTE last month and also an explanation of what Detroit Fire is.
Here's Sheldon. Thank you.
How you doing, Sheldon?
We got a quorum.
Okay, good.
We don't know. Yes.
So much going on.
Okay, Linda, you have the floor.
I've heard your question 3 times though. The DTE bill is just 2 months of payments, it's not one single bill that was really high. Detroit Fire is the company that comes out and inspects our fire extinguisher.
That much?
$60.
No, it was 11,000.
Detroit Fire? That's mistaken, no, it is not $1,000.
11,000 was what she
Yeah.
said.
And DTE 14,000. Yeah.
What they got?
Let's have this looking the accounting wrong. I know my eyes are bad.
No, I think you're looking at the wrong line.
Okay.
So DTE is not even on this month's payroll.
Right, it was last
It was
month.
last month, okay.
Yeah.
And then Detroit Fire is $55, and then the $11,000 is for First Bank Card, which is our credit card. We had a number of trustees who went to NC last month.
I can understand that better. I cannot understand DTE being that high. The estimated payroll, it's not available.
No, I won't process the payroll until tomorrow.
Okay. That's all, thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else from the public that needs to speak? Okay, hearing none, item number 3, which is the request for a supplemental actuarial analysis and experience study. We got a call, of course, this morning from Samantha, who is the attorney for the city, indicating that the mayor would request that this be extended until next month in July. I don't think that we got any particular reason, did we, Deborah?
No, sir.
So absent that, I guess we have no other choice at this point but to carry it over. I noticed in the documentation that the request is for a 3% rate of return. It was my understanding that the request was for a 3.5% request.
The email from Samantha does indicate a 3.5% investment rate return. I'm sorry, is it incorrect in the agenda?
Yes.
Yeah.
If you look at the email, it is 3.5%. That's incorrect in the agenda.
Okay, so let's just correct that to 3.5%, and we will need a motion, I guess, or if there's no objection, we'll just postpone. Why don't we do it officially by a motion to postpone until our next meeting in July.
Move.
Support.
We have a proper motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns in relation to this agenda item?
I guess my question or concern is, even with them proposing this 3.5, I thought there were several of them that they were bringing forth, and I can't see us going with this 3.5. So, are they proposing to bring more?
I think that as a part of this also was that they wanted to do an actuarial study on the $400 a month indefinitely. That was also a part of the original request. So what are you objecting then that we put it on next month's agenda, or do you want to just carry it over and then we'll listen to what they have to say, and then we'll take it.
I feel much better listening.
Okay, so we'll wait. The motion is to postpone until next month. Any further questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, so ordered. We'll then move to agenda item number 4, the 219 audit presentation. We have Mr. Joe.
Why is that saying 18 then? Oh yeah, okay. It said 19.
218, right? Yeah. So we have Mr. Joe Kowalski. that will make a presentation from Plant Moran? Oh, no, that's me. Who's gonna make the presentation?
There's 2 chairs right there.
Okay. Well, you know what? I'll sit here because we're gonna leave a place for that.
I think you want
My handbag.
I can sit next to Joe. Or maybe I'll just sit here.
No, y'all go ahead. Y'all go ahead. Y'all go ahead.
No, comes up. I'll be here. No problem. Someone comes up.
Well, Sheldon's not gonna be here, but James will be here.
So thank you for having us here today and for the opportunity to present to the board. Manju will walk us through the financial report and I will walk us through the letter to the board. My name is Joe Kowalski. I am a partner with Plant Moran in the government practice.
I'm Manju Patnaik and I am the manager on the engagement. With us today, we have Mehdi Hassan. He is an intern and he's interning with us over the summer. And so he's shadowing Joe and me today at the meeting. So the way we've broken it out is there are 2 documents that have been provided to you today. One is just a few pages, which is the required communication, which Joe's going to cover. I'm going to be covering the slightly thicker document, which is actually the financial statements. I'm not going to go through every single page. I'm just going to sort of cover the highlights. So this is, so if you move to page 1 of that letter, the thicker one, yep. So page 1 of this report is what's called the Independent Auditor's Report. This contains our opinion on the financial statements, and we have been able to issue an unmodified opinion, which is like getting an A+ on your exam. It's the highest form of assurance that we can provide as auditors, that the financial statements are materially free of any misstatement. In the entire packet, these 2 pages, which is page 1 and page 2, which is our opinion, is the only piece of information that's ours. The rest of the packet are the financial statements, which are prepared by management, and they are your financial statements. So the next few pages are what's called the MD&A, which is what contains the management's comments about the financial statements. I'd like to turn your attention to actually page 5 of the report. So page 5 is what we would typically call a balance sheet, and this is the snapshot of the system's financial position as of 12/31/18. And as you can see, your total assets are about 455 million, which is like the 3rd number from the bottom. And about 99% of your assets are in investments, which is very typical for a retirement system. So I just wanted to bring your attention to that. And then the big bolded number at the end of that statement of 454.1 million is basically the net position that the system holds. And if we move to page 6, page 6 is basically the income statement, and what it shows is how that net position of 454 million came about. If you look at the number that's 3rd from the bottom, the negative $52.2 million, you'll see that this year, because of how investments performed as of 12/31, you actually lost about $23.3 million in terms of your the value in your investments. And then when you add in what was paid out in admin and retiree costs, you actually ended up with a slight decrease in your net position, so that's how it went down from 506 million at the beginning of the year to about 454.1 million at the end of the year. Any questions on that before I move forward? So starting on page 7 are the notes to your financial statements. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on them. One very significant note is obviously your the notes on GASB 67, the accounting actuarial valuation. And so if you move to page 10 of the report, you will see that right at the top of the page, the based on the valuation that was performed, the total pension liability was 262.1 million. And then when you net it with the planned fiduciary net position, which I just talked about, which is the 454.1 million, there is actually a net pension asset of 191.9 million, which the city will now record on their in their general ledger, basically. But to come up with that 262.1 million of total pension liability, there are several assumptions that I use that go into the calculation. So, you know, there is the inflation rate of 2.25%, there are the salary increases, there is the investment rate of return of 7%, as well as your mortality assumptions. These assumptions are really, really key to that number, because any a small swing in these assumptions could actually create a big swing in what that total pension liability is. So as a part of the audit, we do a lot of work around these assumptions to get comfortable with them, to say, yes, they're reasonable. And so we've done that work and we were able to get comfortable with those assumptions. Just to kind of give you an example of what that swing means, if you turn to page 11 of the financial statements, one of the disclosures that we actually have in the notes to the financial statements, and which is required by GASB for us to include, is basically an impact of what a 1% increase or decrease in that investment rate of return. We're just talking about that one assumption, what that 1% increase or decrease would have on the total pension liability. So if you look at the number that's in the middle, based on a 7% assumption, which is what this the system's assumption, your net pension asset is 191.9 million. If that assumption increases to 8%, the net pension asset would actually increase to 212.9 million. That's a huge swing. And if you went down to a 6%, that's 167.3 million. So this kind of shows clearly how important those assumptions are, and how a small change in them could actually mean a much bigger impact on the total pension liability and therefore the net pension asset itself. So that's the most important disclosure that's within the financial statements. Do you have any questions about?
Yes, I have a question. We're using a 1% increase and a 1% decrease, which seems to be reasonable to me. Now, do you know of anyone that is using a 3.5%?
I was going to go there.
3.5%.
Well, for this particular disclosure, the 1% swing is just for illustrative purposes.
Right.
To show what it would be if it were 1% less or 1% more.
Right.
And the requirement is to show it at 1%. So I'm not aware of anyone using 3.5%.
Okay, that answers my question.
This is for supplemental analysis, and instead of using a 7% discount rate, let's see what liability or the accrued liability is with a 3.5% discount rate. So, but trustees, we're just curious to know, is anyone of your clients actually using anything close to a 3.5%?
Oh, a 3.5% discount rate.
Right.
I don't have any clients that are using a discount rate close to 3.5%.
So it depends.
Right.
So if one of the requirements that GASB 67 talks about is you need to do a 100-year projection of what the health of the plan is. So does the plan have adequate assets to pay out benefits for the next 100 years? And when they do that projection, they take into account what are the plan's earnings, etc. And if any point of time the plan doesn't have the assets to pay out benefits, that's called a depletion date wherein a blended discount rate is used. So that is only if the plan's 100-year projection shows that at some point of time they're going to deplete all their assets and they will not have adequate assets to pay benefits out for the next 100 years.
So what interest rate?
Which does not apply to us, is that correct?
Right, it does not apply to Gers.
All right. Go right ahead.
So that was my piece on the financial statements, and I'm going to turn it over to Joe to go over the letter, which is our required communication to the board.
So the letter that I will discuss today is the one that is signed by me and Matt Manju and dated June 10th. So it should be in your packets. And you might remember that we had a letter that we communicated to the board on April 8th, which was our plan for the audit. This is the letter that sums up the results of that audit and informs the board whether or not we were able to do the audit without difficulty in accordance with the plan, and whether or not there were anything of note that we need to share with you. And so the first thing I'd like to point out is that just a reminder that these are the financial statements for the year ended December 31st. And we were able to issue our clean opinion, and that opinion is dated June 10th. And so that is in accordance with the plan. And that's largely due to the fact that the system was well prepared for the audit, and that there were no hiccups or disagreements or errors discovered during the course of the audit. And that definitely makes the audit go smooth and complete on time. So we want to thank the system staff for that cooperation and the excellence of the work that you did. Moving on to page 2, these are some more required communications that, as the independent auditors, we're required to communicate to you, who are the board responsible for governance of the system. And so the first one is to remind you that under generally accepted auditing standards, our responsibility is to issue an opinion on the financial statements, whether or not they are fairly stated in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And so what we're looking for is, are there any material errors that were caused by error or fraud? And the second responsibility that we have is to gain an understanding of internal controls that's good enough to allow us to plan our audit. And in doing so, if we come across any deficiencies in internal controls, we are required to communicate them to you, and we would be doing that today. However, we did not come across any internal control deficiencies, so I'm happy to report that, and as a system, you should be proud of that fact. The most important thing about the financial statements and the audit is the estimates. Manju talked a bit about those already. On the bottom of page 2, leading on to page 3, there, the most sensitive estimates are listed there. Almost all sets of financial statements for every entity has some level of estimates, and the estimates, by and large, are the things that are the hardest for every entity to be able to come into complete agreement with everyone about, because you're really trying to predict something that will happen in the future. And so the first one that we have listed that you ought to continue to pay attention to is some of your investments are harder to value than others. If they're not readily exchanged on an open market, then it might be harder to determine values for those investments. The other 3 that are listed on the top of page 3, Manju discussed as she went through the financial statements, and those are all really related to the actuarial study. And just the one that I want to highlight there is the mortality tables that were used by the actuary. There have been updates to them. So as you're seeking to get your actuarial reports for the next year, you should be discussing with your actuary whether or not those mortality tables that were used in the past are still relevant for the system. Lastly, just a couple of other required communications. Number 1, we had no difficulties encountered in performing the audit. We had no disagreements with management. And then 3rd, there were no corrected or uncorrected misstatements. On page 4, just a couple of other required communications. We had no significant findings or issues to report to you. We did, as normal, receive a representation letter from management, and that letter is from management to us, basically in a nutshell, just saying, hey, we have cooperated, we've told you everything we know, we've given you everything you've asked for. And then lastly, we're not aware of management consulting with other accountants, and what that basically means is that there's been no opinion shopping, so to speak, that's taken place. So that concludes my summary of the letter, which goes over the results. We're happy to take any questions that you have.
Okay, y'all asked about the change in mortality table. As you know, we have this request for supplemental actuary study. And it's one of the things they're asking is Pub 210, Public Retirement Plan mortality tables. How would that affect our?
So what happened was in 2014, the RP 2014 mortality tables came out. And when those mortality tables were created, they didn't take into account government employees. They were mostly focused on private employees. However, the RP 2014 tables were found to be very aggressive, and there have been new improvement tables that have come out. And what the Pub 210 tables do is they are actually a study that the Society of Actuaries did and put together, and they broke out public sector employees into 3 different divisions: general employees, police and fire, and teachers. And they came up with a comparison of what the existing tables say and what it would look like when the new improvement scales are used. And as a result, what they found was, though in some instances the changes were very small, they still showed that people were not living as long as what the RP 2014 tables were assuming. So I can share the Pub 210 tables with you, Deborah, if you'd like. You can take a look at those. Yeah, I can send those over to you.
Thank you.
No problem.
Did you say that public employees were not living as long?
They weren't, longevity wasn't as long as the assumptions made under that RP 2014 table.
So they were ultra conservative?
What effect would that have, if in fact that assumption was used on this latest actuarial report? What effect would that have in general terms? I know specific, you can't give specifics, but what effect would that have on the dollars?
So I cannot talk about dollars. One of the things we were required to do is, as Joe mentioned, we were required to look at the assumptions being used and get comfortable with them to say, are they reasonable? So we did a lot of research on our end to be able to get comfortable. And one of the things we looked at was the Pub 210 tables. And for the general employees, the ranges weren't as significant as police and fire and the teachers divisions. So that's how we were able to get comfortable, but we did a lot of work around it. We looked at different publications. So in terms of a range, we were able to get comfortable with, but we don't have enough information to say what the dollar impact would be.
All righty. Is there any other questions? Any other comments? Well, I think that the next thing would be to, we have a resolution in our packet to receive this report, file it, and present it to the city. And the city, of course, would mean the executive and the legislative branch. So a motion is in order to that effect.
Support.
And supported. With no further questions, we'd ask that you call the roll.
Albritton?
Yeah.
Balance?
Yes.
Giddings?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Swayze?
Yes.
Patrice Waterman?
Yes.
Motion passed.
You forgot Walker, right?
I'm sorry, James Walker.
Yes.
Motion passed.
All right. I want to thank you for making this presentation, and I also would echo your comments in commending the staff for doing an excellent job in getting us an A+ rating. So thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And next on the agenda, we have item number 5, agenda changes. Are there any agenda changes?
Yes, sir.
No? Okay. Gonna be different. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, a little more than half. About 4 miles an hour.
Okay, agenda changes?
New business, we need to add 2 resolutions for waivers of the training and education policies reimbursement. One is for a cancellation fee for more, and the other is for a baggage fee for P-Water. And those are the only 2 changes I have.
Okay, now what about the value add conference? Is that added on here?
No. Yes, so we need to add a request to the consent agenda that Chairman Moore be allowed to attend the value add conference.
Okay, why don't we then take those 3 things now so we can get them out of the way? We can take them one at a time, or we can collectively take them. What is your pleasure?
Well, your request for the conference can just be included as part of the consent agenda.
All righty, that's fine. What about the other? Let's take the other 2. We can actually do them separately, or I don't think that is there any objection that we take care of both of these at one time?
Let's do it both at once, and I support. We
You support or use?
I mean, I move. I'm sorry, I move.
It's been moved. Their support.
Balance supports.
Okay. Balance supports. Is there any questions, comments, or concerns? All in favor?
Aye.
Any oppositions? Ayes have it, and so ordered. Now, the next item would be consent agenda.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
we need to recognize in the minutes, Linda. I don't know how you could ever not have Linda's name as present. Her name's not on here.
And Kathy McAnally and the other lady from the hospital.
Okay.
Bob, do you remember that other lady's name? Sherry Berg. Oh, maybe it's here then.
Yeah, Sherry Berg is up there.
Okay, what about Kathy
Kathy's name's not
Kathy McAnally?
Okay, we want to add those then, those names on as being present at the last meeting.
And we got another man, but we can't know who he is because we can't ask him.
Okay, any other changes?
Both that man.
Any other changes or questions as it relates to the consent agenda? Hearing none, motion is in order.
Oh, move. Support.
Okay, it's moved and supported. Hearing no further questions or concerns, would you call the roll, please?
For the consent agenda?
Can we just do it?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, and so ordered. Okay, next, then we have agenda item number 7, which would be our consultant report. Steve, it's on you.
All right. First, we'll move to the IPS. Now, with the approval of adjusting the emerging manager program to all cap allocation, we needed to just simply adjust the IPS to show those changes in the allocation, which you all approved last month. So in your document, you have the red line version of the IPS. The first page is changing the date, revised as of today, 2019. If you move to page 11 of the IPS, this is the asset allocation, our target allocation, which we adjusted. So the adjustments are in red. You can see we added all cap and the benchmark was up to 3,000, and added a 12% target with a range of 18 to 15%. We also made the appropriate adjustments to large and small, as we discussed last month. You'll notice that large cap has the biggest decline, and that's just the proportion with the Russell 3000. The Russell 3000 is the largest component of that all cap component is large cap. So we remained in proportion to what we had prior. We just moved more large cap into the all cap allocation. While we're in here, we also adjusted the fixed income index. So Barclays was acquired by Bloomberg, so now it's the Bloomberg Barclays U.S. aggregate. Eventually, it'll probably become the Bloomberg aggregate. We'll make that adjustment when it happens. But so we made that out also. And then at the bottom, we adopted the next page where we made adjustments was page 19. And it's just simply our performance standards. It's what we hold the managers accountable to beating net of fees. And here we wanted to add the all cap index, the Russell 3000, as a core index. So we'll hold the emerging manager accountable for surpassing that index net of fees. And here again, we just adjusted the Barclays index to include the Bloomberg and Barclays. And that's all we had for the IPS adjustments. Close my any questions.
Okay, are there any questions?
No.
So we do have a resolution.
Wait.
Sheldon does.
Go ahead.
I apologize for, I don't know how that meeting satisfied me, but it happened. Of course, not being there to see the report, I just have one concern, and I don't know if you guys spoke about it or not. And it kind of struck me when I was looking at the real estate, the value-added portion, and I don't know if we talked about this or not, but if we initially had allocated 12 million for that particular fund, and due to the fact that we only have 2 players now instead of 3, which is, I'm fine with that, I don't have an issue with that. Do we still not have the same amount of money available for that value added? How did that end up being a smaller number? I know we talked about it, and the more and more I think about it, it didn't make sense to me how it came to less than the 12 million that we started out.
Sure. So it's really just a function of the markets. I mean, when we calculated that 12 million, we had over 500 million in the fund. It was 512, 514. The equity markets came down, and it just so happens now we have 470, 480 million, 490 million. So we're still at almost at the target of about 10%, excluding that 4 million. So that's just how it worked out. Now, if the equity markets are kind to us in the next coming years and the equity allocation increases, then we'll cycle money out of the equity into our real estate bucket. We can decide where we want to go at that point.
So are you saying?
So are we where we need to be for an asset allocation that was for real estate? Have we met our target goal?
In terms of with our commitments, yeah, we're pretty close at this point. So I'm going to refer to the cash flow sheet. Some of you all have it. You might not have that on you, Sheldon. What's that? Okay, it's in the agenda. But if you look at it, we made some adjustments to real estate, including the 8 million we're going to reallocate. And if you go over to the target allocation, column G, it's 10%. And if you look at the allocation, including what we committed, it's 9.6% at this point. So we're about 2 million short.
Okay.
And that will move with market fluctuations.
Okay, all right.
So we're still a little short. It's something we'll think about as we move forward. But you know, that's part of the reallocation, little tweaks we do here and there.
The permissible range is 7 to 10%, not necessarily 10%. Is that correct?
The target's 10 and the permissible range is 7 to 10 because under PA 314, 10% is our limit. We can go over it based on market fluctuations, but we can't. We'd rather not have a print in the IPS of a range that's over the permissible level of 314, so that's why we capped it at 10%.
Are there any other questions?
Nope, that works for me.
Okay. Hearing none, then we have a resolution in our packet to approve.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, so ordered.
All right.
Next, we go to periodic rebalancing.
Staying with that cash flow, we need to raise some money for benefits and expenses. Every couple of quarters, we raise about $6 million. And so in column J, where the blue arrow is, that's our recommendation. Embedded in this as well is a $500,000 capital call from American Realty. That's one of our value-add real estate managers. And we'll see this every quarter or so. They're different. They're open-ended, so they're not going to call all the capital in one chunk. We're in a queue with other investors, and they're going to call a percentage of our allocation. So every quarter or so, you'll see $500,000, $800,000, some money going into it. So this is their first capital call of $556,000. So we included that as well. And if you see on just to the left of the column of recommended adjustments, this is just our over allocation in terms of dollars. So red is under allocation, black is over allocated. And we took the money from small cap just because it was our largest over allocation based on the new targets that we've got. So we have roughly 8.6 million over allocated to small cap. We're going to take 6 million out of it. Next time we'll figure out where's the best place to take our over and under allocation.
Is there any questions or concerns? Okay, hearing none, we have a resolution.
Okay, I'll move.
Support.
Been moved and supported. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. So ordered. Okay. That covers the periodic rebalancing. So next we have reports.
Oh, wait a minute here.
Has the May preliminary performance and the updated values that we emailed to you yesterday.
What did you say, Deborah?
He just goes over the preliminary May report that's in the agenda, and then the updated balances, which was emailed to you and is a handout to the president.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So the May returns. So for May, the fund went down 3.5%. Quarter to date, negative 1.1. Year to date numbers are still strong, 8% year to date. And longer term numbers are still very strong. 5 years, 6%, 3 years, 8%, 10 years, 10%. Since inception, 1995, 8.1% annualized. So good strong numbers. We've had a little bumpy ride here. But if you look down to 1 month and 1 quarter, and if you recall, so we'll highlight the performance number in red. They're underperforming their respective benchmarks, and black is outperforming. But you can see down for the quarter to date and the 1 month, most of our active managers have done fairly well, protecting the downside, which is kind of what we expect a lot of them to do. One of the exceptions is Systematic, who's been struggling. The portfolio manager has left. They announced they were closing it down. We resolved that issue last month by allocating both Systematic and Victory to Piedmont. That transition happened last week. We'll discuss it more next meeting to give you a a recap of what happened. But so Victory and Systematic are, as of now, no longer in the portfolio, and that's managed by Piedmont, a passive index covering the follow the S&P 400. As it relates to the asset value, at the end of May, it was 479 million. As of June 17th, it's up to 492 million. It's been a wacky market. So essentially, you know, if you go all the way back to the third quarter of 2018, the market went straight up at a 9% quarter, one of the best quarters we've had. Then it went down about 9.6%, one of the worst quarters we've had. And then it went straight up again in January, 9.7%. And then since then, it's sort of bounced up and down. We were up about 3% in April, 3% in May, up about 3% monthly. So we're sort of flat to where we were when we ended the first quarter. So this number, probably a little bit more after today. But as it relates to the market and our thoughts, there's a lot of like yellow signs, yellow lights out there, a lot of little flags. So the good and the bad. So the good, for one, the economy in the U.S. is still growing. Slowing down, we're seeing pockets of weakness, but still growing. Interest rates, albeit some people say they're high, they're still considered accommodative. Historically speaking, they're relatively low. If you look across the globe, growth is slowing, but you're seeing stimulus. China's stimulating the heck out of their economy, trying to fight the tariff war. Europe came out yesterday or 2 days ago and said they're going to start stimulating their economy. And in the U.S., there's talk and grumblings about the Fed lowering interest rates, sort of like an insurance cut. They did something similar in 95. I believe the probability is like 84% in July and then 90-something% in September. That's what people put the probability on. So there's some thought of there's going to be some stimulus here in the U.S. Valuations are reasonable, not expensive. We always talk about valuations. We always use the S&P 500. So historically, the S&P is traded 15 times next year's earnings. So if you take all their earnings, which is about $180, and multiply by 15, that's kind of where historically the valuation of the S&P 500 is traded. Right now, it's about 16 times, so a little expensive, but not crazy. However, it's sort of at the high end of its range because there's a lot of uncertainty out there. If you look at the U.S.-China battle, right, there's a lot of uncertainty there. We thought it was going to be done going into the end of the first quarter, and then China backs off. Now they're going to talk next this weekend at the G20. This could be a long, protracted battle, but there's incentives there to get it done. Trump wants to get this done because he needs this as well, right? To say, look at how great I am. I've got NAFTA done. I got this done. So there's some incentive there to get this thing done. Whether it happens or not, I don't know. Another issue, and the one thing that really freaked us out and scared us a little bit was that Trump used tariff as a weapon. So back with the Mexico, right? He used it. He threatened the Mexican government. If they don't stop the immigration issue, he's going to tariff them. That's out of left field. That's a lot of uncertainty. We never, in the business, corporate America, did not expect that to happen. So all that does is increase a lot of uncertainty. Because now, what else is this guy going to do in terms of tariffs? How is he going to mess up our supply chains? And so that's a big deal. And we might see that play out in the second quarter of earnings season when companies report earnings. The quarter ends in June. They're going to start announcing it in July. You might see a lot of companies back off their expectations because since he came out of left field with this Mexican tariff thing, what else is he going to do? And to change a supply chain, to build out a supply chain, it takes multiple years. So if you're sitting there and you're a corporate head and this thing can come out of left field, I'm not about to invest in my supply chain yet. Let me get some understanding of what's going to happen. Because I don't want to spend hundreds of millions of dollars in 2 years investing in somewhere that he's going to slap a tariff on it and then just completely mess up my earnings. So I think that's another thing. Once again, the second quarter, the summer's seasonally slow in terms of news and in terms of volume, so it could get very bumpy in the summer. So we could see a lot of really up and really down. So there's a couple of yellow flags there that we're watching. With all that said, the portfolio has moved a little bit more conservative throughout the year. We began the year fixed income about 20%, we're now 25%. We're right at a little below our target. We moved money from equity to real estate. So we've gotten a little bit more conservative as we've gone through the year. And going forward, we'll keep an eye on these things. And if we have to, we'll tweak it again a little more. What we want to do is little tweaks. We don't want to do anything big because you can't time the market if you're wrong. So you do little tweaks here and there. So we'll continue to do that. One more yellow flag, and I want to bring it up so you talked about it, was the yield curve. The yield curve version. I remember we had that whole education thing about yield curve. And I want use the whiteboard.
Oh, be careful.
I want to use the whiteboard.
Yeah, don't.
Haven't used it yet. I gotta use it.
Don't fall. Oh, I can't. He's gonna have fun.
I gotta use it.
And you draw.
I cannot. My handwriting's awful. So remember the yield curve education. So the yield curve is essentially, it shows the yield of fixed income securities throughout time. So this is the yield, up to Y there, and this is time. So here is like 0 and 90 days and 2 years, 10 years, and then 30 years. It's 30, right? And historically, over time, the yield curve slopes up. It does this, right? And that's essentially saying is, there's more uncertainty out here. So if you're a lender, you require more interest. And so this is a normal sloping yield curve. It yields up. And this is beneficial to the economy. It's beneficial to banks. Because essentially what banks do is they'll borrow from the federal government here in the overnight. They'll lend to consumers out here. So they make a profit. So they'll make a profit here. That's what they do. Now, you fast forward to today, and what we talked about yield curve inversion, how that's a signal sometimes of a recession sometime in the future. Yield curve is sort of really wacky. So it does like this and then that. And so what we always look at is the 10-year and the 2-year. And this isn't to scale. So the 10-year and the 2-year, when this inverts, historically it said, hey, there might be a recession sometime in the next 18 months. The S&P 500 generally peaks about 14 months after this inversion happens. So this did invert, these two did invert on March 22nd for a day. It was more technical, we think, than anything else because it came back. So what we keep an eye on is once this goes to more of a sustained inversion, we'll get a little bit more conservative in our allocation. And again, the thought process is that once this inverts, banks don't make a lot of money. They stop lending money because they're not making money on lending, which slows down the economy. So we're keeping an eye on this as well. This is another thing we're looking at. How to use it. Any questions?
And while he's making his way back to his seat, if you look in your audit report, I did discuss this in our management and discussion and analysis, the yield curve. So.
And with that, I will pause for any. I'm done. Do you have any questions?
That completes the financial report. Okay, then we'll move on to committee reports. Personnel did not meet this month, so I would assume that there will be no report there, but I will announce that with the resignation of Ms. Gaffney, that I've appointed Ms. Swayzer as the chairman of that committee. Of course, Mr. Ballant was also appointed on last month, and so as we take on new trustees, we'll be able to get some additional members of that committee. Is there any reports coming from trustees? Go right ahead.
So in addition to all the items,
You could speak up, Deborah, I'd appreciate it.
in addition to all the items that you reviewed under the consulting section, the correspondence from Brookfield Capital, and I do need to apologize, I mentioned that in the agenda for the rest of the trustees. Brookfield Capital was one of the real estate firms that we had selected to invest $4 million with. Brookfield Capital had requested a meeting, and Chairman Moore offered to bring them into the Finance Committee meeting last month. They did not attend the meeting. They didn't respond to our emails for, they didn't respond to our emails. So the committee had directed me last month to follow up with them, to ask them to respond in writing and to provide the disclosures that the system requires. They responded that they don't believe our interests are aligned, and so they are declining the investment. So we will not be investing with Bloomberg Capital at this time. The Graco Alternative 1 2018 audited financial statements are included in the agenda under my section of the report. You'll note that the SEG investment, which was the one that had the bulk of the losses, that investment was actually written up from less than $1 million
to over $3 million. We'll be getting the summary, I expect to have that today, where they go into more detailed analysis of why the values change. And I will have that as soon as I receive it. The committee also reviewed the correspondence that's in the consent agenda from Wellington. With respect to the asset transition, as Stephen reported, the Munder and Systematic assets were successfully transferred to Piedmont, and they're now managing that mid-cap index fund for us. And they will provide a post-trade analysis in July. Also, we received the first capital call from American Realty, and we will be funding that, as he mentioned, with additional assets being taken through small cap. TerraCap had sent us an initial notice that they would be calling capital within the next 2 weeks. And then the next day I received an email that there were delays in signatures on letters of intent for some of the pending acquisitions. So TerraCap has not called in capital at this point. The Oakbrook, the North Point contract. North Point and Sizer, you recall, they were being graduated. They're the Michigan managers are being graduated. We'll have a direct relationship with them. Cynthia has put a version of her deadline version of her adjustments to the North Point contract on the legal report. Sizer is a little bit of a different situation. We everyone assumed that these two managers, we were essentially taking out the middleman, right? Instead of North Point and Sizer reporting to Alex, they would have a direct relationship with us in a separately managed account. That is the case for North Point, and that's moving along pretty smoothly. That is not the case for Sizer. Sizer essentially has said that the fee schedule that they gave us is for a commingled fund, which means we can take our assets and either sell them off, or we would transfer them over and put them into a fund with a lot of other investors. The Finance Committee reviewed it, and that wasn't conveyed to us at the time. We have the contracts for the commingled fund, and Cynthia and I are reviewing them. But it will have to come back to the board, because the board will have to decide, do you want to go into this commingled fund for the fee schedule that they gave us? Would you like to do a separate direct account with them for a higher amount, or would you just like to keep them under the ADDIX program? So we're going to put together all the information, put together a comparison of the fee schedules, but that will come back before you next month. Does anyone have any questions about that?
So they don't want to be separate.
They do. It's just not in a separately managed account. So right now, those assets are ours. They're custodied in Northern Trust. We give Sizer access to them, and they manage the portfolio for us.
Okay.
They are under the ADDIX umbrella, which means our relationship is with ADDIX, and ADDIX pays that underlying manager.
Okay.
Graduating them was essentially saying, instead of you reporting through ADDIX, we're going to bring you out. You're going to have a direct relationship with us, doing the same thing you were doing. Exact same thing, same portfolio. But you're going to get a little bit more in fees, and our fees are going to be a little bit less, right?
Okay.
We need somewhere under
Okay.
the ADDIX amount. What they proposed to us, the fee schedule that they gave us, is not for a separately managed account. It's not for them to continue doing what they're doing now. It's to take those assets that we have and put them in a commingled fund. So they have this fund that they set up that has other investors in it. We would, get that direct ownership and put those assets in a fund. So, and that was kind of the Finance Committee's discussion. No one understood that. We thought it was a separately managed account as well, which is why we have to get the different trust documents for that commingled fund and things like that. They do want to have that direct relationship. It's just there was this miscommunication about the vehicle that we would use for those assets. You look like
I just like, okay, so how much is the difference in fees?
So it would be 10 basis points higher for a separately managed account than what they initially said.
And how much for the commingle?
So right now, Sizer gets about 35 basis points. So ADDIX gets 50, and they give Sizer 35.
And they don't do it in site, and addicts don't do anything for Sizer, right?
Well, they do reporting and, performance.
Well, how does they do performance? Are they doing anything actually?
Every month in your agenda, not in this month because it was late, but every month in your agenda, you get the addicts report.
Right.
Which shows the performance of all the underlying managers.
Okay, so then next month, Sizer will be giving us, or whenever we get them set up, they'll be doing their own
They will be just like all the other managers, where they will.
report.
They have,
Not necessarily. The finance committee will take a look at this and then make whatever recommendation to the full board on next month. It's not understood that that's what will happen.
Right.
that is correct.
Okay, I'm good.
Make that meeting, 'cause my thing is if we agreed upon something and they're trying to change it, then it's just stay the way it is.
They always proposed that the commingled fund was a miscommunication on our part, because a lot of times when we look at commingled funds, and we have commingled funds in the plan, Wellington is one, Northwest is one. We look for just the cheapest vehicle in terms of total fees. And so the value proposition is still roughly the same, if I say roughly $8,000 a commingled fund. But you do hand the securities over to them. They'll take the securities in kind, and it'll be under their trust custody account, which is based in Comerica, right? So essentially what a commingled fund is, it's a mutual fund. It just doesn't trade on a daily basis. So you have a share of this fund.
It's a private, right, it's a private fund, it's not registered with the SEC. I'd be happy to do just kind of a write-up of where we are at this point. But again, it was just something that the finance committee said, hey, this wasn't our understanding. So it obviously has to go back.
What we're recommending is that the executive director, along with our attorney, with the input of the consultants, look at all of this investment, and at that point we'll have all the facts on the table to provide to the full board to make a final decision.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Unless you guys have any other questions.
No.
I need to know what Cynthia thinks.
That's part of the hold up.
We'll wait for the report then.
And there's no rush. I mean, the assets is still being managed by Sizer under the Addison Brothers, so it's not take our time on this.
Okay.
Does the expected return change at all?
It's
bigger management at this.
Well, no, I actually did get financial reports from Sizer. This fund is not very, it doesn't have a history. For the institutional shares, they just started that in October of 2017. So it doesn't even have a very long track record. And the track record that fund does have is actually lower than what Sizer is providing to you now. So there are a lot of things that you just need to know about, to be clear about before you make that decision. And
But
then,
institutional shares actually are a Comerica strategy, so they charge them 65 basis points. So it's a little bit higher than what we're being charged, and then it would be a difference, but it would be the underlying portfolio company. And the whole point of commingled funds is part of the deposit return. So when you look at the deposit return, it's a number of separate accounts that have to be like managed the same way. And commingled funds are just considered one of those.
no, it's reported separately.
So the commingled funds other ones we have, are those, where are those?
Within the
Same thing.
investment managers, custodial bank. It's an independent trustee, independent custodial bank. That's what it's a trust. They don't hold the security somewhere else.
I have a question, and I don't want to obviously belabor this, but, so right now, it's separately managed by Sizer under the Addicts program. Are you saying that they won't separately manage it?
No, we're saying they want to charge you more than we pay
Yeah,
your
they
addicts.
can't. They have MFNs.
I-
In order to charge
No,
45 basis
no,
points,
me
means
neither.
$75 million.
We'll do the highlights, and I think you guys will get a better understanding, and like Ms. Moore said, they're gonna review everything, look cost comparison of all three options.
Paying them more money for the
Whatever
same
you're
product.
comfortable with, whatever you think is the best solution.
Yeah. Better get
That don't
these.
make no sense. Real men do get depressed.
Yeah, there's a little bit, and they get a little more of it. Yeah, about 8,000.
As indicated, this, all of this information will be reviewed once again by the Finance Committee with the input of our attorney and the consultant with the executive director. And all of that information will be brought back to the board. And at that point, the board can decide what it wants to do.
The Finance Committee also received a draft of the funding policy, as you know, I believe it's P 202 that requires us to have a funding policy. It really is something that we should be working with the city on, but there should be a funding policy in place for the system. We initially did the draft in 2018, so the Finance Committee reviewed the draft, but it was just an initial review. The Finance Committee reviewed the disability reexamination matter that is under new business. They are recommending that we would move forward with the process and reclassify this member as not disabled, and that would begin the appeal process essentially.
Okay, will he not get a check this month?
No, as a matter of fact, during the appeals process, the member continued to get paid. And for this particular member, because of his union, his local 2002, even if after he exhausts the system's appeal policy, you still can't stop his pension until the city certifies that he's capable of returning to work. So he will continue to be.
Well, what has the city responded so far? We've communicated with them, right? That he's able to go back to work. So what?
Can we, Billy, can we cover that? It's under the executive director's report where that will be going on.
Okay.
Going over in depth. Let me save it for then.
No. Well, okay.
And that,
I mean, go to work, positions of DPW, send it to work.
Right. We got a vacancy there.
Are you?
Balance here.
Deborah, are you finished with the finance report, or you have?
yes, that's the Finance Committee.
Okay,
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Regarding the Bloomfield Capital situation. You said there was a letter. Will we be provided that letter?
Yes, I actually meant to include all of the communications so that all the trustees would have that, and I just forgot. So yes, I will email all of that.
And you also mentioned something about us not being aligned with the system's requirements not being aligned with their.
That was their response. So I will send you that. That was their response as to why they would decline the investment.
So you have no idea what items they're talking about not in line with the system.
They were not specific about the misalignment, correct?
Anything else, Mr. Walker?
No, that's it right now.
All right. So next we have the executive director's report. Go right ahead, Deborah.
What you got in your hair? A blue, pink or moisturizer?
With respect to the disability annual procedures report, you all know that we've been in the process of identifying a new medical director, and we have two members who must be re-examined. They've both been scheduled for July with a new medical director. The disability annual procedures report, we're at the stage where we need to verify their income to make sure that they're below a certain level, which is basically they can't earn more than they would have been making had they stayed on the job. So we've sent the initial notices. They must complete a 45016 so that we can go to the IRS and get their transcripts. And those notices will mail on June 10th. I would like to report also that everyone who has retired since January 2018 through May of 2019, the finals have been completed.
Good job.
And again, I'll forward the consequent capital breakfall alternative summary plan as soon as I receive it. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Questions? On On the write-up of gray code, is that reflected in our 12/31/18 financial statement?
Right, so that the financial statement that you receive, they'll do a summary of the year and they'll do a lot more commentary, so you understand the changes in the underlying.
So plan ran, reviewed, didn't have an issue.
It's very fair.
You have anything else, Bob?
Oh, no, that's it.
So then we'll go to new business.
Okay, item A is to reclassify a disability member who's no longer, who was determined by your medical director to be no longer disabled. I outlined in the memo on your agenda, just kind of the next step of the process. Trustees Weaver just mentioned, this member does continue to be paid while he exhausts the system's appeals process. At this point, the notice that we sent to the member notifying him that he's being disabled, that information has gone to the city, but there's nothing for the city to do at this point. They're just being informed and apprised of where we are in the process. The appeals process is strictly within under the auspices of the system, so he has 10 days in which to file his appeal. We'll notify him today by overnight mail that we need to receive that. And once he responds, that he would like to appeal the decision, he'll need to make an appointment with his doctor. If his doctor concurs with our doctor, then we go to the city and say, hey, this member's no longer disabled, you need to make a determination.
Wait a minute, what's that? What does that determination mean?
I'm sorry,
What does the determination? You say if he goes to his doctor and our doctor agree that he's no longer disabled, he has to make a determination. What does that mean?
I'm sorry, that's not what I meant. If his doctor agrees with our doctor, then that's kind of, if his doctor agrees with our doctor, they're both saying this gentleman is capable of returning to work. That ends the appeals process. We notify the city and the member, because at that point, the member must go and essentially check in with the city and report to work. The city can either return him to work, or they can certify that he's not capable of returning to work. The third option that they could do is say he's capable of returning to work, but we don't have a job for him. And that would be a whole, a completely different matter that we can talk about down the road. If his doctor disagrees with our doctor, then those two doctors select a third doctor, and the third doctor examines the member. If that doctor agrees with our medical director, again, we send notice to the city, he's not disabled, he's make your determination. If that third doctor agrees with his doctor, he continues on his disability.
What if we certified able to work and the city says we don't want it?
Right, so like I said, Local 2002 has a special provision.
Okay.
If he's gone through the process of the system and he's been determined disabled by not disabled by two doctors, we send a notice to the city, he goes to report to the city has to determine that he's capable of returning to work. So the provision says, only upon a determination by the city that he's capable of returning to work, does his pension stop. If they never send us anything in writing saying he's capable of returning to work, his pension continues.
I hope he gets his money, because I so hate to see a bad day happen.
But at this point, we're sending the notice to the member that the board has concurred in the medical director's opinion and that he has 2 days of office.
Well, that's what we do for this.
Great, Deb. Any questions on that?
I don't have no questions, but I have opinions on it. I'll save it for another time. I do have one question.
Okay.
How impartial are these doctors?
doctors, what we found out is, we're in the process of looking for a new medical director. And what we found out is that there were kind of 5 firms that did this type of work for public retirement systems. 2 of them merged, and I think one of them purchased the other one, but essentially there's like 3 big players left. How reliable are they?
No, how impartial.
How impartial? We send them a job description, we send the member, and we assume that they are performing a thorough enough examination to determine whether that member is capable of performing that job. I don't know if any allocations of impartiality or
let me give y'all a little brief story, which is why I'm questioning this.
Oh, yeah.
And Mayor Moore is well aware of my situation. I ended up totally permanently disabled from General Motors. After fighting for 3 years saying I was not hurt, then I was not hurt to the point where I couldn't work anymore. Now, the doctor that I had, Dr. William Cohen, orthopedic specialist, determined me total and permanently disabled. Sent this work to all this paperwork to GM. They denied it 3 times. I ended up having my attorney and the doctor working together because of this fact. Years prior, William Cohen was an impartial medical examiner for General Motors. They accepted every determination he gave, good or bad. Now, he's out of their realm. He's handling his own patient. Now he doesn't know what he's talking about.
Wow.
I was fortunate because I had him for a physician and the history he had with them. How many other people are not that fortunate?
Did you all have an opportunity to read the medical director's report?
I'm reading this now.
I read it.
Oh,
okay. The report looks like mine.
Okay.
From General Motors and impartial doctor, which did not coincide with Dr. Cohen. And Walter, you well aware of my situation.
Yeah. Well, you know,
that's why I approached this question.
Well,
Because impartiality is not always impartial. It depends on where your allegiance is aligned. Is it aligned with what's right and fair, or is it aligned with the particular company?
You know, as you well know, I think that we're in the process now. When I say we, I'm talking about the retirement board itself, in trying to select a medical director for to represent our interests. And so that's a question that we need to look at. I think the question is very relevant. We need to look at that in our selection. But you know as well as I do that in case of General Motors, they're obviously going to select people that are going to be pro General Motors, I would imagine. That's that. And we would hope, of course, in terms of our situation, we want to ask that question to make sure that decisions are being made on their medical condition and not the fact that they're biased in one way or the other. And we would be hopeful that when they would sit down with the representative, and we would hope that the doctor for the member would also be fair and impartial. But that's kind of hard to determine, because I think that's something like, you know, everybody has one, and we can't determine that in advance. Oftentimes that's determined by whatever decisions that they make after the fact. So we would hope that it would be based upon actual medical conditions, but that's something we would only know. Actually, we wouldn't know, because I know I'm not medically qualified to determine that for any individual. And I don't know that there's anybody around the table that would be in that position to make that call.
Well, my only position is knowledge is power. And the more you know, the more apt you are to make a better decision in whatever it is.
That's for sure.
And when you're dealing with somebody's health in their livelihood, you need to get the best people involved in all aspects.
Well, I'm sure that we'll take that under consideration as we determine who will be the medical director for our system.
And trustee Walker, you said something about giving the member an opportunity, and our appeals process does.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but I'm belaying the point. I got all of that. I understand all of that. I'm speaking from personal experience. I understand about appeals process and all of that kind of stuff. I still want to make sure that the system, as well as the employee, is getting the fair shake. That's all I'm saying. And that doesn't always happen.
What I'm going to say is the board actually will be involved because there's a hearing where the member can say, I want to meet with the board, I want to bring my doctor, I want to bring my lawyer, and they can come and appeal directly to this board for you guys to agree with his doctor. So there is a lot of opportunity for the member to have that FaceTime and to actually put more information on the table than what's included in the medical reports. There is that opportunity to have a hearing. So,
Deborah, what point does that happen?
that happens at the time that he goes to see his doctor. So if he goes to see his doctor report disagrees with ours, he can request a medical exam. The appeal process, I thought I put it in the agenda, Cynthia. I'll have to send it to you because this policy that you have is a policy. There's actually an appeal process. That's another document.
Well, the only reason I ask that is because the retirement system ordinance states that if upon such medical examination of the retired, the medical director reports to the board that the retired is physically able and capable of resuming employment with the city, he or she shall be returned to active service in the employ of the city, and his or her disability retirement allowance shall terminate, provided the report of the medical director is concurred in by the board. So that's where I'm just, so you're saying as they go through the appeal process, he'll have the opportunity to come before this board and they can agree with
Right, so let's
the
be clear.
determination of the medical director.
The finance director, the finance committee is recommending that we reclassify this member. It should have been taken by personnel, but they haven't not. The finance committee is recommending this. Absolutely, if you guys want to say he is disabled, you can do that, but you're going to have some, you can't just do it out of sympathy. They actually have to have, as a commissioner,
I'm not questioning
No, I
that
just wanted to make
aspect
sure
at all,
they
but
understand
I'm
you
just saying
can do that.
Right.
You absolutely can do that. Thank you. Yes. So this was the recommendation, because they didn't have a reason to disagree with the medical director.
Okay, this would begin the process then. We do have a resolution and a recommendation coming from the Finance Committee that we concur with the medical director's decision and that the board approves to terminate the member's disability classification and to reclassify the member as non-disabled subject to the appeal process. So if the member feels that they are not able to, they can then do whatever is necessary to protect their interests. What we're basically saying is that, we've hired a medical director and this medical director has examined this individual and made a determination, and we're concurring with the medical director's decision. What is the pleasure of the board? I might be, and also, as I understand it, the individual would still draw their pension until a final determination is made. What is the pleasure of the board?
Follow the procedures.
Okay, we got a resolution. What is in terms of the resolution, do we have a mover and a second?
Oh, move.
We do have a mover and support. Any further questions, comments, or concern? Hearing none, all in favor? Opposed?
Aye.
Oh, he's still there?
Yeah. I thought you would have left.
I thought he was gone.
I would have left.
The motion is approved.
You are. Thank you.
Go right ahead. Scheduling the annual meeting.
Schedule the annual meeting, we're proposing October 29th, is the day prior to your regular board meeting. We do this as
Everyone get you a megaphone.
Please, and our schedule is dictated by that. So I will, as soon as you approve it, I will book. And then I will have information work.
It don't matter. It don't matter. It'll be over in 2
I
hours.
think.
It'll be over.
My son. Okay.
Yeah, second.
He didn't say that,
A
Chris.
motion is in order to accept October 29th as the date of our annual meeting.
I think he was sleepy.
Is there a mover?
Yeah, move and support. Yes.
We do have a mover in support?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions, comments, or concerns? All in favor?
All right.
Opposed?
Yeah, I'm going to San Diego.
Did you-
Yes, I'm going to San Diego.
Okay, the motion is passed.
I got this stupid
A
one.
resolution to approve member trustee election calendar.
So, trustee Jackson's term was set to expire March 31st. The ordinance requires that we fill any vacancies that occur within 90 days. And the election rules allow for the board to set the timing of any special election. The calendar that is before you would allow us to certify the results of the election at the August board meeting. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I had sent you and also Walter and Sheldon
Right.
concerns about the election process. First of all, I want this calendar or whatever we have in this, whatever we're gonna call this, stuff that we have in our agenda to be online. So we won't have to hear these complaints about people not knowing we're having an election. Because it's very uncomfortable as a person of color to hear, oh, we had election and I never even got my ballot. And that certain people with certain letters didn't receive their ballot. What else did I put down in my letter? Deborah, you remember?
You realize that even, so we get return mail, we had a return letter at the last election. Instead of keeping that with all the other election materials, on the day of the election, we threw it out because it was just return mail. Trustee Swazer has asked that even if it's just return mail, that we keep that permanently as well.
Yeah.
That's proof.
Yeah. Election schedule to be posted on the website. All ballots submitted to the election official and no ballot shall be destroyed or trashed. Any envelopes returned for whatever reason shall be retained as part of the official election process. Last election, number of returned ballots weren't able to be counted as no one could read their signatures. I recommend that the voters both print and sign their names and the instructions tell them to do so. Because when we had a number of ballots that no one, if you write your name, I'm not used to it. Some people just
Scribble.
2 lines. You don't know who they are. And you can't tell who they are. If they don't have a nice little label saying Billy Swazer, my address, you might think it's from John Blow. And who is that? And you can't figure his name out in the checklist. So we need to have people print their name legibly and then sign their name.
There's no reason, right, there's no reason for the signature, we're just gonna have them print, it's just a better way to go.
Well, isn't the signature to say it was them, not somebody else? Not saying that it was Patrice, it was Billy Swazer, because mine, when she signed my name and when I signed my name, it's gonna be 2 different signatures. Because hers is gonna be prettier.
It needs to be both.
Never know.
Both a signature and printed.
Yeah, 'cause
Right.
I'd rather, yeah.
Safe than sorry. Safe than sorry.
Anything else, Billy?
I would probably figured out something else, but I haven't figured it out yet, so.
When you figure it out, let us know.
I just stopped. No, I won't figure that out before the election. Okay. I move that we approve the member trustee election calendar.
Support.
So we have a proper motion before us. Any further questions, comments, or concerns?
Oh, okay. Is this for the entire city?
No, this is for,
You mean the position that people will be able to vote?
Is active, retired, and deferred city employees.
Active and retired.
And deferred.
active, deferred, and retired.
That's everybody that will be entitled at some point in their life to a pension that worked for the city of Pontiac.
Gotcha.
Here, any other questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Is that an aye?
Yes, that was an aye.
Okay.
He's got greater delay than you do.
Okay. All righty. Okay, then we'll move to the legal report.
You skip resolution D?
Approve to the 2018 annual summary.
Oh, yeah. Move.
Support.
Okay, we have a proper motion before us. Any questions, comments, concern? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, so ordered. Now we'll do legal report.
So this is the last, so resolution, got it.
What you need? Who did? I did. This was me and Billy.
I just have a couple of items to report on.
Okay.
One, I wanted to, I did meet with the new trustees, some of the new trustees on Friday, went through the orientation. James, I know you had a conflict. Whatever works for you, I'd be happy to meet with you and go over. I think we spent about 45 minutes or so, an hour, and I've got a nice booklet.
Okay.
So,
Anytime between now and July 2nd,
okay, all right, I'll look at my
because I'll
calendar.
be incapacitated for a couple months.
Oh, you're gonna have your knee surgery, right?
Oh, boy.
So between now and July 2nd.
We'll have to get with Shelton and get a little basket for you.
Yeah.
So you can get well.
Okay, the first item. I might use that. Okay. So item number 1 under Exhibit A is just a red line version of the agreement that I'm currently negotiating with North Point. I'm waiting to hear back from them on that. Deborah did raise a couple of additional questions. I'll look at those and work with her and or reach out to them if it's something that needs to be changed. Item number 2, correspondence regarding retiree Ralph Bow. I talked about this at the last meeting. He has a number of withholding orders going against his pension that exceed 50%. So I just attached a copy of my letter to the friend of the court, and I copied both parties, both Mr. Bow and his former spouse, letting them know that we are going to be sending 50% under the law to the friend of the court, and they're going to disperse the money accordingly under those withholding orders. And then the last item in the general matters are just the fees that we received, and there's been no change. I do have a full litigation report, just because every, so many months I like to put that in front of you, so we need to go into closed session, although I don't think it'll take